Hey everybody, welcome to video notes for topic 7.5, indoor air pollutants. We're starting out on page 427 here. So first we'll talk about differences in indoor air pollution in developed versus developing countries. So remember that development is going to play a very large role in the sources of indoor air pollution that residents are exposed to. Developing nations, remember, are going to rely on subsistence fuels like biomass. This would be wood, charcoal, animal manure, things that they can gather easily and combust for personal warming or for heating their food. So the problem with this is that this releases carbon monoxide, particulate matter, NOx, and VOx. Those are all chemicals that have impacts on the respiratory system, whether it's respiratory irritation or asphyxiation or even death in the case of carbon monoxide, and even SO2 could be released if they are combusting coal. In developed nations, the sources are more from industrial products such as furniture or carpet. So these things have adhesives or glues that hold them together. Those release VOx. We've got cleaning chemicals, insulation, which can release asbestos. Radon can leak in through cracks in the basement or foundation. Old paint could expose residents to lead. And then if carbon monoxide is present, that's going to be because of faulty furnace ventilation. We'll get into each of those sources in more depth here shortly. So first here we have particulate matter. So remember that the smaller the particulate matter, the more harmful. And so particulate matter under 2.5 microns can embed in the lungs easier than larger particles, so it's even worse. Remember, indoor combustion of biomass, things that release smoke, is a primary source when we're talking about developing nations. Even in developed nations, though, wood stoves or fireplaces can release particulate matter. Even dust could be considered particulate matter. Next, we have a really potent form of particulate matter called asbestos. And asbestos was a primary additive to insulation for many years, but it's been found to be a respiratory irritant and trigger lung cancer, so it is no longer used. Again, it used to be used in ceilings or in walls as insulation or even hot water pipes. But if asbestos is still in a location, it's not dangerous until it's disturbed. So once those particles become airborne and can enter the respiratory tract, then it is dangerous, at which point it should be removed carefully by trained professionals with masks and proper ventilation. That room should be sealed off, and this should be done again by trained professionals. Next, we have carbon monoxide, and again, carbon monoxide can also be released in developing nations from combustion of biomass. We've got the picture right here of indoor cooking, and that can release carbon monoxide. So it is a byproduct of most combustion, so that would count biomass, as well as natural gas. So natural gas, the primary gas used in furnaces, is going to be the source of carbon monoxide in developed nations. In developed nations, when the furnace ventilation system malfunctions, that carbon monoxide can be released into the house, typically in the basement here, rather than ventilated out through a pipe that should take it outside. So if that carbon monoxide builds up in the house, since it is a colorless, odorless gas, you need a carbon monoxide detector to tell you whether or not that's there. So remember, it's very important to have that ventilation pipe fixed. That can solve the issue of leaking carbon monoxide. And then remember that carbon monoxide is an asphyxiant, which means it can suffocate people or animals because it displaces oxygen in the bloodstream. Next, we have VOx. So VOx, remember, volatile organic compounds, are primarily released in developed nations by furniture, paneling, carpets, things that contain adhesives or glues or sealant chemicals, and these chemicals are the source of those VOx. So think of the new carpet smell or the new building smell. That is those volatile organic compounds being released. Cleaning supplies, spray odorizers, so Febreze, new plastics, even fabrics can all release VOx as well. Generally, VOx impacts include respiratory irritation and the worsening of asthma. And then there's one VOC in particular, one volatile organic compound you should know, formaldehyde. This is a specific and potent chemical used to manufacture particle board, carpet glues, and so again, this is that new carpet smell that you can kind of think of. In high concentrations, especially soon after the carpet's been installed, it can cause burning and irritation in the eyes and the respiratory tract, and it's also been demonstrated to cause cancer in lab animals, and it is highly suspected to be a human carcinogen. So it is likely that it triggers cancer development in humans. Again, all indoor Vox can be considered irritants to the eyes and the lungs and can worsen asthma. Next, we have another very dangerous indoor air pollutant called radon. Radon is a gas that is released from the radioactive decay of uranium that normally exists in rocks beneath the surface of the ground, especially granite, and it can enter homes as a gas through cracks in the foundation, and then once it enters the air, it can be breathed in by residents, but it can also seep into groundwater sources and enter the body through drinking water. Another thing is it can attach to particles of dust in the air, and those can be inhaled. It is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States after smoking, and so it is a very concerning air pollutant. You can test for it using a radon air testing device. That will be an airborne monitor that lets you know how much radon is present in the air, and the EPA recommends that you seal cracks in the foundation and increase airflow or ventilation in the house. That will help disperse the radon if it is entering the house. Sealing the cracks would help prevent it from entering in the first place. So as we've sort of talked about these Vox that can be released in buildings, new buildings are especially prone to this. It's a condition called sick building syndrome. And sick building syndrome is this idea that newer buildings typically have higher concentrations of indoor air pollutants due to off-gassing or sort of evaporation of these Vox and hydrocarbons from things like new furniture, carpeting, particle board, etc. And so these synthetic adhesives in the carpet, again, formaldehyde is a prime example, they are released into the air because they're not completely dried by the time the building becomes occupied. And so, again, picture this new building smell. We've probably all experienced this. This leads to employees or residents of the buildings experiencing higher rates of the following: headaches, nausea, throat and eye irritation, respiratory inflammation. EPA recommends or cites, I should say, 4 main causes of this. One is inadequate or faulty ventilation. Another one is a high level of these indoor pollutant sources like glues, carpeting, furniture, cleaning agents, even copy machines. Outdoor pollutants like vehicle exhaust can enter the building via faulty intake air design, and then even biological contaminants such as mold can form inside, or pollen from outside can enter. Next, we have airborne or natural air pollutants as well as lead. I'm not going to explain the lead sticky because we've talked about it already, but just as a quick recap here, there are natural air pollutants. Dust is found in many homes, buildings. That's a natural air pollutant. It is a respiratory irritant. It can make asthma worse. And then we have mold. Mold typically forms in damp, dark areas with poor airflow. Especially black mold can trigger these respiratory irritations, and it can release spores into the air, and that is what actually triggers these respiratory problems.